Yeah, my name is Daniel. I'm currently one of the 3 project leads of our open source project Catena-X. This is the official corresponding project, open source project to Catena-X. And Roman, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Hello, I'm Roman from ZF, and also contributing from Catena-X via the consortium and also in the association.
All right. Today, we want to give you a short introduction. What is Catena-X about, right? The big picture, and what is the status? Where are we, especially when we view on the open source part, right? Our open source project, what is the status? What are the next steps here? So, what is Catena-X all about? Catena-X is the first open and collaborative network for the automotive industry, and our goal is to solve the toughest industry problems together. But what are these industry problems, right? As you can see here, we want to achieve end-to-end data chains, meaning to connect all the players of our value chain to solve use cases like PCF, that means product carbon footprint, or circular economy, right? Because these are use cases that we can solve by ourselves, like as for me as BMW or for Roman as ZF, we have to collaborate. But to do this, we need several rules and all this stuff, right, that we show you now, that this works. And I think what differentiates Catena from other initiatives is that you can also see here. We try to solve an entire business problem. That means we want to see not only what needs to be done for an OEM or a supplier or recycler, but we have the complete view on the whole data space. We want to enter vertical collaboration. That means, for example, within our company, right? We are doing things not as we used to do it. We try to do it differently. We collaborate, we exchange data that we didn't exchange in the past, and so on. And I think what is the most important thing that separates Catena from other things, or other initiatives, are that we have a 100% integrated look into the system. So we have a look into the business requirements, the demand from our stakeholders, from our partners in the value chain. We have a look into technology, right? We try to derive from our demands what is the right technology for this specific problem. And I think this is what's missing in most of our other initiatives is we also have a look into the legal topics. This means, for example, specific use cases, you need a legal framework to exchange data. This also means that we need legal contracts, we need policies, and all the stuff that we have a trusted and data sovereign data exchange along this value chain. And this is kind of what we try to achieve, right? So we want to digitalize the whole supply chain. We started with 10 initial use cases, and now we're heading to our next phase, as today maybe it's also our go live that we see later. And this is the introduction to it. So, but how does this all work? So we have 3 main pillars in Catena-X. The first one is the association, as you can see in the top level. The association takes care of the standardization, certification, and the governance of the whole ecosystem, meaning here we define the demands of the ecosystem, for example, for specific use cases. We write them down in specifications and standards so that everyone can use it and so that we can also create, as I said, the interoperable and data sovereign use cases. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar was the development area, as you can see on the left-hand side. So there we started the development of all our artifacts that we needed for Catena-X. This included, for example, our first reference implementations for specific services, like, I'm not sure if you heard of it, the Eclipse Dataspace components or the Eclipse Dataspace connector. And we also started, as I said, as we have the 100% integrated solution here, we also worked on legal topics such as frameworks and legal contracts. And the third pillar, that's the operating area. So that's kind of, who's familiar with the, let's say, historic plan, build, run framework? So we have the plan in the association, we have the build in the development area, and the run part, so how the services are maintained and operated. This is in the operating area, and there we started this year with the selection of our first operating company. Go live is today, and therefore here will be provided all the services in the future. And as you can see here, it's highlighted. The most important part, which is the glue, what I would say, within this whole ecosystem, is our open source project Tractus-X. Because this combines all these three pillars, and there's where we meet to work together, to collaborate. Yeah? And what is the current status, right? We started with the consortia, as I said, like, I think it was August 2021, so almost 2 years ago, with 28 initial partners, consisting of OEM, suppliers, and so on, which defined the first version of Catena-X. Now, we brought everything to, or we are still in the progress and bringing everything to the open source project Tractus-X. So what is already there is the source code. What we are doing next is, for example, we want to bring in also the planning part and all this stuff that needs to be done, also in open source. So that's the next step. So we started within the consortia. It was really closed because, you know, consortia work closed. But now we want to open up so that everyone can contribute, can use it, and that we can further develop it together from all areas, from the association, from the development area, and from the operating environment. That's the idea, right? We are on, so we are pretty new open source project, but the goal is really to establish a full-blown project in the near future. In addition to that, what I said, you can see the 28 initial development partners on the left-hand side, right? We had a really good Kickstart team, which consists of many companies from the industry, but also from research and also solution providers, because that's, I think, one of the key elements that we have in Catena. It's not just the outfitters, it's not just the adopters, but we work together to find the best solution. It's not good to see here, right? Sorry for that, but on the right-hand side, you can see we open it up also internationally. As I said, we want to open up the open source project, but also our efforts concerning internationalization. So we started with a hub concept within the association. We already have over 170 global partners, and our first hubs are in France and Sweden, and there are more to come in the near future. We are currently in talks with Japan and South Korea, for example, that we also build up hubs there so that we have really international footprint here. So, but how does this all work, right? We already saw the 3 pillars, and now we go into a little bit deeper. It looks really, really complex, but I want to highlight it because a data space is complex, right? It's not just we build some federated services and then it's done. It's more than that, as you can see here. So maybe you can recognize the 3 pillars. We have still the Catena-X association on top. We have the development environment down left and the operating environment on the right-hand side. So the association, as I said, it takes care of all the data space governance, what we call it. And you can see here what needs to be done there. So we have normative documents, just like architecture guardrails. So how does the architecture management within the whole data space work? What are the guardrails? This will be defined in the association. We have also defined a regulatory framework. That means this consists of all these contracts and policies that you need to use when you exchange data, for example. From that derived, we have technical specifications and standards. So, for example, if someone wants to offer a solution within the data space, they need to apply to these standards, they need to work them in. And that means, for example, you want to provide an Eclipse data space connector, you go to that standard, you incorporate it, and you can offer this on our marketplaces. And the last part is conformity assessment, right? So that everything works together, as I said, with interoperability and data sovereignty. We have a conformity assessment body who takes care of that every component that is implemented is corresponds to the standards, and so we ensure that trust and also interoperability within the network is ensured. So those are the parts within the Catena-X association. Coming back to the most important part of today, right? We have the EclipseCon project within our development area, and what is in there. So this is really important because we have several things that we provide via our open source project. We have all the services, like the base layer, what we call the network layer of the data space, so that the whole data space is working like the functional basis. This is divided in what we call core and onboarding service, enablement services. You don't have to know that, but this is the basis to work in the data space. That includes, for example, the identity and access management, services for data exchange, and the marketplace, and so on. On top of it, and this will be the next talk from Max, we will provide kits. What are kits, right? Max will go in depth into this topic, but this is something that solution providers can use to build their applications in the network. It's pretty similar to what we maybe know from Apple or Google, right? So there is everything defined, everything is, we call it keep it together, right? Everything in one place for solution providers and adopters to connect to the network or create solutions out there. And on the right-hand side, it's the operating environment. We have different roles there to provide the services. And as you can see here, this completes the whole picture. And what is also important is that we want to focus as Catena-X on the stuff that is relevant for the automotive industry, meaning we don't want to reinvent stuff that is already there. So we have collaborations with several partners like Gaia-X, right? We use their clearing service, we adapt their trust services and so on. So we don't need to do this. We also have cooperation with the IDSA for architecture. We work with Eclipse for open source, right? So we could do our own open source project, but why? We can use the framework of the Eclipse Foundation. Everything is there and it's working. And for all the, let's say, scalability related stuff concerning use cases, we also work with associations like the International Digital Twin Association, or like for sustainability use cases like the Global Battery Alliance and so on. So meaning we are focused on our part, doing this good, and collaborate where we think it's needed to also ensure interoperability between different initiatives. Maybe you also heard there's coming up like Factory X and tons of other X's in the future, and they want to work together, right? So it's important to have the same basis, and this is why we engage also in other initiatives so that we have the same base level here. And now I think I head over to Roman, who can tell you something more about the operating environment.
Thanks. So, hello? Test? Okay, it's working. So I would like to dive a bit deeper into how the different roles now interact with Tractors X and how different companies interact with Tractors X. Generally speaking, we can divide it into two main categories. The one are on the top, the provider, and the second one are data provider consumer. So first of all, the provider. What a provider? Provider are all the different companies who are not directly participating in a use case. So they're not directly participating, for example, in a traceability use case, in a PCF, product carbon footprint use case, or something like that. They providing services for all the other parties within the data space. So they, for example, develop an application for a traceability use case or for a PCF application. Or they also publish and provide certain components you need in order to connect to the data space. It was already mentioned, the Eclipse data space components, the Eclipse data space connector, for example. And they are mainly using the code which is open in Tractors X, the reference implementations. They're enhancing it, and then they're also contributing back if they have new features, requirements, and so on, but they're also offering their services to other participants. The second big category are the data provider and the consumers. So those are all the companies who are actually participating in the use case itself. So they're exchanging data, they're providing data, they're receiving data in order to fulfill the business value, for example, like traceability and so on. Their case is mainly they're going to Tractors X, they're using the reference implementation, customize it for their needs, and then they use it in order to participate. So if we now go a bit deeper into those two main roles, the two gray blocks you can see on the top, those are basically the provider roles, and then on the bottom you have the data provider and consumer you can see here. I know it's a very complicated picture, I try to break it down. So what do we have basically? The foundation Daniel mentioned before, so those two gray blocks, those are the different provider roles. And what do we have there? We have the core service providers. This is the network layer and the base functionality of the network, so that the data space actually runs with functionalities which was mentioned like EIM and so on. We also have an onboarding service provider, so if you would like to participate in Catena-X, you have to go to an onboarding service provider, and this company onboards you into Catena-X. And then also to get support, we have an advisory provider, so a company which is offering consulting services to get you on board and run up. And then we also have an enablement service and business applications. So those companies help you to get either business applications to participate in one of those 10 mentioned use cases, or to connect your company to the data space with those set enablement services. And then we have this data provider consumer, and this basically participant interacts with all of those different other roles. So first of all, he needs to connect to basically the infrastructure of Catena-X to use it. And he can also, if he wants to, buy different business applications, but he can also use open source reference implementations, Structures-X, and use it in order for participation. We have two other roles in Catena-X, which are not strictly part in the either data provider consumer category or provider category. This is the conformity assessment body. So basically, all the implementations which we have in Structures-X are reference implementations, and our standards are according to those reference implementations. And at the end of the day, everything which is operated in Catena-X needs to be certified. And for that, we have a conformity assessment body. And this is exactly this body, which is certifying your solution if it meets the Catena-X standards. And for that, we also have the Structures-X project, where all the reference implementations are in place. And the other role is the Catena-X Association itself, as mentioned earlier, the general governance body. So now diving a bit deeper into the operating model. Now, behind all of the theory, there are actually companies behind that. Also another big picture, but the main thing here is that there are already the first operating company out there who's offering all of those services. As already mentioned, the first operating company, which is already out there, is Catena-X, but there are many more operating companies to come. So we have a federated, decentralized approach, so there could be always a third, second, fourth operating company to power Catena-X. And as we can see, this company, in this case, offering different services. For example, you can get onboarded by this company. The company is also operating the core services, so that data space itself is up and running. And they're also having a marketplace where you can see different applications or services which you can buy or subscribe to in order to participate in use cases as mentioned or something like that. So those are the different provider options as mentioned. Business applications, onboarding, and enablement services. And I wanted to say it was planned, but I think it's a really nice coincidence. Basically, today is our big go live. So, we had a beta phase starting at the HMI in April this year. In this beta phase, a lot of companies already used Catena-X in order to have some use cases in place. For example, we as at F had a use case with BMW for traceability. BMW had another use case with Drexelmeier where it was about a battery pass. So we already did a lot of testing. And now today, this is a big go live. So we have a new release, which is now a few weeks old, and now we're basically live. So the network can be used. You can now get onboarded. You can use Catena-X. You can join the use case, and you can also contribute to the code and to all our other projects we have. And how does it look like from a perspective? So we as at F, for example, we are a data provider consumer, so a data prosumer. So we're a company who is using Catena-X in order to have a business value through those given use cases. And how did we use Structures-X, or how do we use Catena-X in general? So basically, we as a larger company need to have the challenge if we want to participate in a use case and we need to provide data. First of all, we need to extract the data from our systems. We need to transform it in a correct semantic and a correct data format, and then we need to provide it. And basically, the stack we have built up is for data provisioning, the data provisioner. So it's also based on open source, Apache Camel in this case, which we're using to basically extract the data from our systems, to transform it in correct data format, which is also standardized by Catena-X, and then also to provide it within, because we're working mainly with digital twins in Catena-X, in the different systems like a submodel server or digital twin registry. And then at the end, we also need to give access to other parties in Catena-X to this data, and this is done by the Eclipse Dataspace components, formerly known as Eclipse Dataspace Connector. And basically what we're doing here is we're using all of those reference implementations just like Catena-X, And we are enhancing it because, as Daniel mentioned, initially the main contribution was from the consortia, and because it's a public funded project, it's not allowed to develop those open source components all the way to the industrial grade level. So this is also a reason why we want to open up to open source, so we can now enhance it all the way to industrial grade level. And this is basically what we're also doing now as a data provider consumer. We're using the reference implementation from Doctors-X, enhance it to a productive grade level, and then using it in order to participate. And there we're also playing back all the different requirements, all different bugs and features which we maybe face or encounter while participating. And where we can play back all of those features and so on, for that I would hand over to Daniel.
All right. So as I said, right, we started as an early open source project, or we're in an early phase, but we are doing the next steps here, and all of you are invited to help us, right, and to join our community here. So we have two big events upcoming. So the first one is we have our next open planning, right? So everyone can see what we're doing. We give transparency about our features, about our next steps, and also we would like to invite you, right, to contribute or just first see what's there, right? If it fits to you or if you're interested in contributing there, using the stuff. But this is our open planning days. So we have one day that's the 19th of October. We do the refinement stuff, right? So more deep dive. But if you're interested in getting the transparency about all the features, you can join on the 25th of October there. You'll find all the information on our Doctors-X website with the links and so on, but it's just like short advertisement here. And which we are really proud of, right? As we said, we are a young community. We also start with our first Eclipse Doctors-X community days in December. 7th and 8th December. We meet in Stuttgart at the Arena 2036, right? So they help us, they support us in setting this up. And there we will have like 3 or 4 streams. So one is more like developer oriented, so we will have sessions about the EDC, we have sessions about traceability and the Supply Chain Act use case, so we want to really deep dive into this section if you're interested. We also have a stream about semantic models, so we collaborate also with the EDTA there, as I said, so we will figure out how we create semantic models in open source and so on. And the last stream is how we can improve our open source working model, right? As I said, yeah, we are new here, and we want to engage with the community, figure out how we want to work, what are our processes, what needs to be done, right? What can be improved. And as I said, everyone is invited there to help us, and that would be it from our side, and we're happy to take some questions, right? Thank you, guys.
Are there any questions? Come on. I guess there are some.
I know Catena-X is really complex, right? So I could understand that you're overwhelmed, but maybe one question afterwards we can meet in the lobby, right?
There's one question.
So that would be the next steps, right? Thanks for the question. So we focused on setting up Catena-X first, but now, as I said, we need to collaborate. And as I showed, right, we are keen to collaborate, right? We don't want to invent something by our own if it's already there. So I think the next steps would be to join other Eclipse working groups. We already did this with, for example, the Eclipse Dataspace Components working group, where we join to really engage on this part. But concerning other use cases or other initiatives on the automotive level, I think that would be the next step for us to really ensure interoperability and that it works perfectly together. So if someone is here, we can also meet.
Yeah, great opportunity.
All right.
And more questions? If not, then thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Roman.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks.